Hello there everyone and welcome. Lydia here with you today, and I'm so glad that you could join me for the release of the stamp wheel. So today we are going to be creating 2 cards, and you can see them both here with just one stamped panel. So I am going to be using the very pretty stamp wheel, and I'm just going to move my flip plate over to the side. The piece of cardstock that I'm working on today is 7 by 7, so that fits perfectly within the sticky mat that you can see there. One of these stamp sets I will be using today is the Craft Your Life Project Kit Vintage Tapestry, and I'm taking the rose shaped image that we have, and this is the base, and I'm just popping that into place on my flip plate. As you can see, I do have little enamel dots in each of the corners to help me line up. So for this layer here, I'm using the pink pearl ink, and I'm just making sure that I line up those little enamel dots that are on my flip plate into the corners that you can see that are gold on the stamp wheel. So once I have that nicely stamped down, I'm going to ink my image up again. I haven't moved it, and I'm just going to twist my plate 4 times. And this again is going to add the enamel dots into the 4 corners, but different 4 corners that we have. And I'm just going to keep doing this 4 times, so we have 4 of the same image in equidistant places around this stamped panel that we are creating. Hopefully that's the right word. So again, I'm just using the pink pearl to stamp all of these base images into place. So I'm just going to pop that in, just making sure all of those enamel dots are lined up in the corners, and then we can stamp that one down. Now I did keep that one at real time. I am going to speed the rest of them up because I'm just going to be doing exactly the same technique. So what I've done is I have lined up the image into place onto the first one. And I am stamping this twice using the Coral Bliss ink to give us that darker kind of look there. And again, just making sure that I have those little enamel dots placed into position on the little corners before I stamp those down. So when I have done the second layer, I'm then going to move on to the third layer. Again, I've lined this up, and again, I'm stamping this twice to give us that bolder look on this layer. And for this layer here, I am using the Heartbeat ink. I'm then going to go into the little smaller flowers on the same stamp set. I'm just popping that into place around one of the flower images that we already have stamped. And for the base of those, I have used the Mountain Mist ink. Once that has all been stamped, I'm then going to move on to the leaves. And I've just popped those into place onto kind of one of the flower clusters that we're creating, and it is going to fit perfectly on the rest of them when we twist them. For this layer of the leaves, I am using the Marshland ink for those. I then decided to add a second one of those little flowers that we've already stamped. So again, line that into place and then inked with the Mountain Mist ink for that one. Once that had been done, I added in another leaf, again using the Marshland ink to kind of fill in the space. Once I had all of the larger images in place, I then decided to go ahead and add in the second layer to our little flowers that we have. For this layer here, I am using the Volcano Lake ink, and you can see I'm just lining up, then twisting it round like I did with the first flower. Really, really easy to do. It does take a little time, but I do think that it is worth it in the end. For the third layer of all of these little flowers that we have here, I am using the Lagoon ink, and I did stamp that twice to give us that bolder look on this layer here. I just love the colours that we have in this kind of wreath at the minute. It's just so fresh and springy, and I am totally ready for spring. So I'm just going to keep going ahead and just making sure all of those third layers are on those little flowers. I then have the little flower center in, and then I wanted to add some smaller flowers. So I have this sophisticated wreath, and I'm just popping those 3 tiny little flowers that we have in here to kind of fill in the gaps that we have in our wreath stamping. So I'm just popping those into place, and I just think these look really, really cute. I love having some smaller flowers to fill in gaps, and just mixing and matching stamp sets really utilizes all of the images on there. So I'm going to stamp these all into place using the chamomile ink. So that is the 3 little flowers and also the flower centers that we have. So once that was done and all of the flower centers were stamped, I then moved on to the second layers of the little flower centers that we have. The little flower centers for the tiny little flowers from the sophisticated wreath were really hard to kind of get onto my stamp wheel plate, so I just decided to add one of them to an acrylic block and just stamp those into place by hand, which didn't really take a whole lot of time. I did use one flower center for all 3 flowers, and I used the Snapdragon ink for that. I'm also using the Snapdragon ink to add in the flower centers to the larger, smaller flowers that we have on our little wreath image. So once all of the flower centers were done, I can then move back onto the leaves and add in the rest of the layers. So what I've done is I've lined up all of the leaf layers onto the 3 different leaf clusters that we have. Pick that up with my stamping platform, flip plate, and then I have inked all of the second layers using the Sea Forest ink. So I'm just going to pop those all into place. Once that has been done, I'm going to move ahead and go on to the 3rd layers with the Mangrove Root ink. So now my wreath is complete. I can take that out of my stamp wheel and I'm going to add in the base layer to the roses just using the coordinating colouring stencil. I'm just going to pop that into place around the little stamped image, and I'm just going to really lightly use some of the pink pearl ink just to go over the image, and you can see just how pretty that looks. You could definitely go without this if you wanted to, but I do love how it looks. So I am going really, really light on this. I don't want to add too much ink to kind of get rid of any of that detail that we've added with the stamping. Once that has been done, I can then cut my little panel that we have here into 2 cards. So for the first one, I am just going to trim this down to 4 1/4. And then once I have this down to 4 1/4, I can then turn that round and I'm just going to trim both of these edges, top and bottom, to make sure that the whole panel then goes to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. You may need to kind of turn it round a little bit just to make sure that you have it cut perfectly where you want it to go. Once that's done, I can move that one over to the side. I then have my other little panel that has still a very pretty pattern on, and I do want this going diagonally across a card base. So the card base is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I'm just going to add some of the super sticky tape from Altenew just at the top portion here. And then I can add my little cut panel just on a diagonal, and I'm just kind of lining it up with the corner. You can see the left hand corner, and then once I'm happy with the placement on that, I can then cut off any overhanging pieces using my little scissors. I find it easier to do this from behind because you can see exactly where you need to cut, and then it gives you a neater finish that way. So to kind of finish this card off here, I did want to add a panel that was popped up. So I'm just taking another panel, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I'm just lining that up with the bottom of the panel, and then on both sides, I'm adding a little bit of a guideline so I can see where I need to trim that to get that perfect diagonal line. So we're not covering over too much of that pretty panel that we've just created. So once I'm happy, I can then add another little notch down the bottom to see where I do need to trim this without any measuring. I do find that the less measuring, the better. Once that's done, I am just going to add in the sentiments. I have this sentiment here from the Craft Your Life project kit, and I'm just stamping that into place onto the little panel that we've just cut using some obsidian ink. For the other card, I'm using a sentiment from the Sophisticated Wreath stamp set and just stamping that into place on the little unstamped portion that we have in the center of the wreath. Again, using the obsidian ink. To pop up the panel, all I'm doing is I'm adding some foam tape onto the card base and then popping the panel into place. And here are our 2 cards. I just love how these look. The wreath was so easy to create and the colors are just beautiful as well. Thank you so much for joining me today. It has been a pleasure. If you do create a card that was inspired by this, it would be great if you do share. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and we'll see you again really, really soon. Bye-bye. Hey there, Lydia here. I really do hope that you've just enjoyed the video. If so, please subscribe to the Altenew YouTube channel. Also, turn on the notification bell so you can get your daily dose of crafty techniques and tutorials just like this. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.